What it do, what it do. It's your boy, DJ Nova Fresh, and this is the Culture Uncut Podcast. And man, we got a great show today, bro. We got some legal help. Yesterday, I was all over the place with the Diddy case. So we got somebody that's going to set the record straight for us and a lot of people. So y'all about to get schooled. And I'm kicking it here with the main man, Mr.
Go ahead,
I'll be
man.
there.
You already know what time it is, man. I knew he was gonna come, man. You like the class snitch, boy. You gonna tell the people when somebody late.
You know it, be like him right there.
Well, then let me sneak in real quick. But I'm glad Miss J. Barnes is on the kind of sort some things out, because you told a lot of lies yesterday, and we need some clarification on some things. So
Very much so. Very much so. So before we get started, you want to introduce yourself for the people?
I can.
Go ahead. Do your thing.
All right. Well, hello, people. I'm Jamila Bynar Barnes, former state and federal prosecutor, career prosecutor of 16 years, based out here in DJ Nova Fresh's home state of Louisiana.
Yeah.
And so glad to be here.
Hey, so you say former. So that means you for hire if I get in trouble? You for hire? Can I retain you?
For the right price.
How much the retainer is? Just tell me how much the retainer is.
We'll have to talk about that offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you know Louisiana, man, you go on vacation, leave on probation, man. Yeah.
Well, we won't give away all of it.
Well, that's the second time. Every time we got a lawyer on, you try to get a military discount. I see, boy. You must have.
You know it, boy. I'm trying to. Hey, man, you never know. Hey, it's always good to have a lawyer, man, on call.
That's right.
You talked about them boys. You broke them boys out in New Orleans. Did they find them? The ones
I ain't break nobody out of New Orleans. They got like 5 out of the 10 though, I think.
Yeah, they have a few.
Yeah, they found one dude sleep on the bench. I'm like, how you break out of prison and go to sleep on a bench?
Well, it's hard work.
I mean, that means he ain't got no family. Nobody holding him down. You already know what's about to happen to him in jail.
Nah, he's just playing homeless.
You play homeless after you break out of jail. What's the point of breaking out of jail? I'm good, bro. Ain't got nowhere to go anyway.
I figure you just let the smoke die down. The last people you gonna check, usually, right? Like if I'm guessing if I'm just laid out on a park bench, 9 times out of 10 people just gonna walk by and leave me alone. But if you have somebody's address, they're gonna go to all your well-known spots. They're gonna hit up Nova Mama house real quick.
But Ms. J, we want to just talk about you, like being from Louisiana, graduating from the best high school in the state, in the world.
Absolutely.
Peabody Magnet High School, you know.
That's right. And then, shout out to the HBHSs, historically black high schools.
Yes. And then proceeding to Southern, and then graduating from prestigious Southern law.
That's right.
Like, what made you go down that career path? What made you choose the law career?
It sounds kind of cliche, but actually that was always my plan. Look, I'm going to go even further back than Peabody. When I was at Lincoln Road Primary School.
Miss Beasley, kindergarten class? I
did. Miss Beasley kindergarten class. That's right. Even back then, when I was like in 1st and 2nd grade, for some reason, I wanted to be an attorney. And I don't know where the interest was formed or how it even got there, but somehow I guess God just planted the seed in my head and it sprouted. And then I got more interested, like as I was matriculating through high school, and I just so happened to be part of that law and order generation. And so prosecution was always my interest. Because they were litigators. When you look at prosecutors, they don't live behind a desk, right? They're out in the community. They live in the courtroom. They are litigators. They're zealous advocates. And so that to me really spoke to me. And so after seeing that in action, it was no question in my mind, like that's what I wanted to do. And with criminal law, you know, it's ever evolving. It's interesting and it touches everyone. You know, crimes or, you know, criminal law is no respect of person. Everybody at some point will either be the victim of a crime, no matter, you know, how innocuous or how big. We've all had our bicycles stolen, maybe in our homes burglarized. In this digital age, someone's trying to assume our identities or steal our credit information. So it's like being a victim of crime is almost a rite of passage in humanity in this day and age. And so, and I really had a heart for service. So it was just natural to me. And so, like you said, graduated from Peabody, went to Southern for undergrad, went to the Southern University Law Center for law school. And then for some strange reason, I wasn't through with school. And I actually went to Temple University and got my LLM in trial advocacy, really sharpening those courtroom skills. And so been doing it for, like I said, the past 16 years, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Wow, for
What you got,
16 years. Any aspirations to like jump into like any activism
I don't know.
or
I can't
politics?
say one way or the other, but I will say this: wherever there's a need and I'm available and I can help, then I'll be there.
Okay, that's good. So, like, why federal? Like, what was the progression? So, how did you start out prosecuting? Like, what's the normal progression for a prosecutor? How did you get to the federal level?
Well, I graduated from law school in 2009, in May of 2009, set for the Louisiana bar, which is probably one of the most rigorous bar examinations in the world. There's 9 parts to it. It's all essay. You're in a room with about 300-400 other people just writing out your answers. You're taking different sections each day, and it's given over the period of a week. So graduated that May, set for the bar that July, and passed, thank God, all 9 the first time, as we say it. And so I got barred later that year. Well, I reached out to the district attorney's office in our hometown, in which, we have parishes here. So that was the Rapides Parish District Attorney's Office. So reached out to the DA at the time, who was Mr. James Jam Down. And he told me, he said, I don't have any attorney positions available right now. He said, but we can hire you as to help get our domestic violence section off the ground. And so, I'm unemployed. I got student loan debt. I'm engaged. I could stay with my mom for free. So I was like, I'll take it. So started working November the 1st of 2009 in his office. And if you know anything about DA's offices, it's very fast. It's baptism by fire. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on. So I went there with the intention of helping getting this domestic violence section off the ground, helping with it. And I think maybe not even a week or 2 into it, they were like, hey, in addition to helping with the DV stuff, do you mind helping us with our misdemeanor docket? I was like, sure. Like, no extra money. I'm like, sure, but you'll get some experience. Well, experience is invaluable in this practice. And so I said, sure, I'll do that. So within a week or 2, I'm doing the DV stuff and helping with the misdemeanor docket. And they say, a couple weeks later, they say, oh, and while you're at it, we got some felony cases, that you could help out with those too, if you like. And so I was
hungry.
Sure. No,
she'll do it for free.
No extra money.
She hungry. She'll do it for free.
Exactly. Look, to get her while
no
you can.
discounts now, huh?
So, and he only hired me with the understanding that I will only be there for a year. Like, because it was a grant that he was paying me out of, and he only had it for a year. So with this, I don't even think we're in December yet. And they're like, hey, can you do some felony cases too? You want to do? I was like, sure. So hop on that. So now I'm helping with the DV stuff. I have a misdemeanor docket and I have a felony docket. And then in December, I happened to get paired with before I got there, was the only Black female ADA in the office. They paired me with her. They said she has a homicide case coming up or whatever. She said, do you want to help me with it? I was like, sure. Homicide case. Literally, my law degree still has the new car smell on it. She's like, you want to help with this murder case? Like, bet. Yes, let's do it. So the day after the Saints win the Super Bowl,
you lock somebody up. Look at you.
No, that's when trial starts. That's when trial starts.
So you can't even go to the parade.
She showed up drunk.
No, we can't do anything. Like, we celebrated, we had a good time, but okay. But we've been prepping the case from through December, January, and all of that. Day after the Saints win the Super Bowl, trial starts. So we're picking the jury. We're doing all of this. So my very first, literally, I hadn't been on the job 2 months, and my very first trial was a 2nd-degree murder case. And she trained me on that case. I cut my teeth on that murder case. And she said, I'm thinking, I've helped build the case. I've helped prep it and all of this. I was like,
you thought you were about to argue, yeah?
Well, no, I thought I was about to sit down and watch her do her thing and learn. And we get the jury seated, and she looks at me and she says, okay, go voir dire the jury. I said, huh? And she said, go voir dire the jury. And she was like, I mean, if you can't do it. I was like, oh, no. I can do it. Just give me a minute. So
Oh,
we
you
were on
went
a
to
break.
Southern Law.
Yeah,
You went
right.
to
I was
Southern
like,
Law.
look,
I'm from
seriousness of
Peabody.
purpose, okay? I'm from Peabody, right? From a neighborhood with no name. I was like, I could do it. And so she said, okay. She's like, they on break. When we go back in there, we'll get started. So I walk in, so we come back from the break. Like I say, second degree murder trial. I'm like, Lord have mercy. We got to get justice for this, because he was the victim, I think, was 18 years old, who had been killed. And, you know, his mother, his family, and everybody there. And I was like, Lord, I can't mess this up. And I was like, I hope they don't know how new I am, you know? But as a senior ADA told me, she was like, no, 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 no. You're going to learn by doing. And that's the best way to learn, in my
The best
opinion.
way.
Absolutely. And so we got up there, the jury comes in, they sit down, and she's like, you're up. And I walk up there to the podium and I tell them, I said, this is the first case that I've ever tried in my life. I said, and I will never forget any of you. You're like my first kiss. I said, in doing this, I said, it's like your first kiss. I'll never forget you. And I looked back at her, and she just got all this pride in her eyes. She was like, well, you told them that you have. And we went on and we tried that case, and it was a dog fight from beginning to end, but they came back guilty at the end of it. So we got justice for that family. But when I tell you everything that could go wrong in that case, in that trial, went wrong, but it was such a great learning experience for me. And then once that happened, I was hooked. It was like, well, when is the next one?
It's
And
like
when
that
is the
first
next
hit.
one? Yeah, I know. And when is the next one? And so, but like I say, doing that, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about trial practice. It taught me a lot about connecting with the jury. And it taught me a lot about getting justice for a victim's family. And so I'm forever grateful for that experience. So that's how it started out. I did my 5 years at the state level. The next thing you know, I end up meeting the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Louisiana at a conference. And she happened to be a native of Pineville, Louisiana, which is like our sister city, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Small world. We everywhere.
We're everywhere. Absolutely. And so she and I get to talking, and, you know, she's the U.S. attorney of this federal district. And she says, you know, we may have some openings soon if you'd be interested. And, you know, I was shocked. And sure enough, opening came up a couple of months later. I applied. And in 2014, I ended up becoming an assistant United States attorney for the Western District of Louisiana. Then the rest was history with that. We're the
You were so
go ahead.
good. You were so good that they tried to assassinate you.
Right.
That's
What?
like they
He's
tried to
joking.
assassinate her, Trey.
He's
Go
joking.
ahead.
He's
Okay,
joking, but
okay.
he's not. He's joking, but he's not.
Somebody, what, your character maybe, or like not?
No.
He said
No,
y'all
he's
got a
talking
lot of
about.
murders and stuff like that. I know,
Well,
but the police
actually,
don't care about that.
the situation that he's referring to happened while I was a federal prosecutor, and I had reported back to the office to get my laptop. Myself, my husband, and my 3 young children in the back seat. And as we pull up to get my laptop at the office, we roll down the window to get it, swipe into the federal building, and shots ring out. Somebody shooting at us. I grabbed my son, I think was 4 months old at the time. I grabbed him out the car, hid him behind the shack. The security guards come out. Literally, it's like a situation where we were like pinned down. So that's what he's referring to.
Gosh.
It was an individual who was suffering from, he had at least a dozen different mental health diagnoses. And when my family and I pulled up, in his mind, we were public enemy number 1, and he just started shooting. And so
Yeah,
that's what he means
Take my
by,
dog out, man. I was
right.
like,
That's what he means by when he
that's
says
scary.
that. So yeah, it was a scary situation, but he was ultimately prosecuted, and hopefully he's receiving all of the mental health services that he needs in federal prison.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, since you've been rocking that out for 16 years, tons of experience. I didn't know about this situation, but I was gonna ask you, like, how has the justice system like changed you, like after working in the system for that long? Like, has it changed you since you
I
started?
think absolutely, and probably the biggest way that it's changed me, it has been when I've become a parent. You know, working in the criminal justice system, you really get to you get that backstage pass and that bird's eye view of things that are going on that the public may not be privy to. And when I was with the state and also federally also, I worked a lot of child exploitation cases, which are some of the most egregious cases that you can investigate and prosecute because you're dealing with live child victims. And that typically involves, children being sexually exploited, child pornography, and things like that. Investigating those cases, you learn just how prevalent these predators are. And so as a parent, it definitely changed me because I essentially became, and still am, very hypervigilant about my children and where they go, what they do on the internet as far as their access to it. Even when it's something as simple as us going out to eat, I'm very hypervigilant about the people around us. If they're staring at them just a little too long, like my spidey senses go off. So it definitely has changed me in that regard, right? Because it's when you've done it and you've done it for a long time, you can essentially spot a predator a mile away just by how they carry themselves, how they react to children that they don't know. And so it definitely has changed me in that respect.
Do your kids give you pushback? I don't know what age your kids is. I know my girls are teenage. When as a father, when I get those spidey senses went out, and
Yeah.
and I say, hey, look, stay close to me or whatever. Hey, I'm old enough. I'm 17, 18, yada yada
Yeah.
yada. But you know the surroundings, and it's a bad spot. Have your kids give you any pushback when it comes to that? Like, all right, well, I can take care of it, or
They do in some regards. And then I have to, that's when it's my job as a parent to kind of bring them back to reality and say, I understand that that's what you may think, but did you hear about this happening? And it like happened up the street or around the corner, or it happened across the country, but to a little boy who was your same age. And he thought he had it all figured out too, or they thought that they had enough protections in place to keep this at bay. So I combat that pushback with just giving them real life examples of how it went wrong for somebody else who thought they had it all together. And that proves to be quite effective because, they'll believe the news article or the news report or the YouTube video quicker than they will believe me, the person who's in the thick of it. And so I just use all of those opportunities to just still advocate and educate them on what's really going on, but in a kid-friendly way.
in my house, we had a couple of lawyers, so they want to argue back and forth, and then both of us pleading our case, and then
Yeah, I can
usually the
imagine
parent
with
went.
teenage girls. Yeah.
So just speaking of that, just what's been in the news lately, the Diddy case. So
Oh no, I haven't heard about that. I'm just kidding.
just so, and I mean you've been putting out some great topics, breakdown of the case from a prosecutor standpoint, just from a lawyer standpoint. So from a legal standpoint, what makes this case so significant?
Well, I think one of the first things that makes it so significant to me is that this is a federal investigation, right?
Mhm.
And it seems to have been quite an extensive federal investigation. And it's unique in that it's a situation where we essentially have criminality and celebrity intersecting. And so it's drawing from a lot of different areas. We have allegations of sexual misconduct, human trafficking, drug abuse, violence. And so it's almost like a made for TV movie in real time when you're dealing with this. And this is someone who we kind of saw like it's the rise and fall of Diddy, right? We saw him back like in the 90s build himself up to become this mogul, right? Who started off in the music industry and then branched off into all of the forms of entertainment and lifestyle with
And successful at it.
alcohol.
He was
And
successful.
very, very successful at it. So I think it's very interesting that we're looking at this now. And I think that's why why it's so interesting to all of us, because it's a person that we essentially saw rise. And now we're watching this catastrophic fall, allegedly by his own doing.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Trey, you got anything?
I'll shoot after you because
Okay.
I can go
So-
down a rabbit hole.
No, I asked this because a lot of people right now, the trial they said is projected to last 8 weeks. So
Mhm.
we just got through the whole situation with Cassie, and a lot of people are saying this just sounds like domestic violence. Where are they going with this?
Mhm.
And this is just only a piece to it. And I think in one of your posts you alluded to the weave how it's being woven together right now.
Yeah.
And Could you speak to that?
Can. So, like I said, there's so many different allegations in this case, right? And if you take a look at a copy of the indictment, this is being charged as a RICO conspiracy, a racketeering conspiracy, which in itself is very unique for this type of case. So again, we have patterns of sexual misconduct, allegations of human trafficking, violence, and there's a suggestion of this long-term abuse of power by Diddy. So it raises questions about systemic issues in the music and entertainment industries, and quite frankly, their failure to intervene, or even if they had a duty to intervene. So the RICO aspect of it, you're right. It's very accurate to consider this like a web, because a RICO case is a web, because it's different from other criminal offenses, because you're not viewing, in other criminal offenses, you're viewing them as individual acts. This one thing happened on this one day, and therefore that's a violation of the law. But when you're looking at a RICO case, it's more of a ongoing criminal enterprise. And it's very rarely applied in celebrity context, and it's usually reserved for organized crimes, right? You typically hear of RICO with respect to gangs or mafia type cases and things like that, where you have so many crimes that have occurred over this long period of time that, look, we're just going to put all of this together and call it a criminal enterprise. And so that's what we're seeing here, is that when you look at the indictment, they're alleging that Diddy, by virtue of all of these enterprises that he's involved in, Bad Boy Records, Ciroc, all of this other different stuff, Bad Boy Films, like it's just so many different things that he was involved in, that by virtue of him being CEO or over these enterprises, that he's essentially exploited them or used them in a criminal way. And so that's where the RICO part comes in. And so that's why you're seeing witnesses as far as like the assistants and things like that being called in the stand, saying that, you know, as his assistant, I was tasked with, you know, I may have been hired to be his assistant through the record company or through the spirits company. But in addition to that, he also had me reserving hotel rooms in other states, making sure they were fully stocked for the freak offs and things like that. So it could be very confusing if you look at it, like you said, individually. You could say, oh, well, this is just domestic violence, or, you know, this is just drug abuse, or in some respects, some people are even saying, well, where's the crime? Because it seems like most of this stuff involved consensual acts. Yeah, it may seem like that on the surface, but the question that jurors are probably going to be asking themselves, and what prosecutors are going to be asking them to question is, yeah, but where did that cut off? Because we've all probably seen situations where, let's say you and I get together and we say, hey, let's start executing this scheme or scam on, let's say, banks. Okay. And you tell me, hey, Jamila, I'm going to provide you with some fake checks. You go in the bank, you cash them, and we'll split the cash 50-50. And I said, okay, sounds like it'll work out for both of us. Okay. You do your part, I do mine. And we say we do it the first time, and and we're successful, and you give me half of the money. And then the second time we do it, we're successful. And then you say, well, I can't give you 50% this time. I can only give you 20%. Okay, that wasn't the arrangement, but I guess so. And then we do it a third time, and you say, well, I can't even give you 20% this time. You're going to have to hold on. And I'm like, well, no, we were in this for the long haul, and I did my part to what's going on. And let's say we get to arguing about that, and then all of a sudden, you attack me or you assault me. And you say, no, you're going to continue doing it, and you're going to go in there, you're going to get all the money, and you're going to bring it to me. Well, now something that may have started off as a consensual criminal enterprise is now turning into something else, because now I'm going in the bank because you assaulted me. I'm in fear for my life, or you make threats or things to me. So my consent essentially has been vitiated, because now I'm not acting on my own accord. I'm acting out of survival instinct, or I'm acting because you're holding all the cards or you're pulling all of the strings. So I think that's the questions that the jury's probably going to ask themselves. And I think probably Ms. Ventura on the stand kind of alluded to that, or admitted that like, yeah, I was his girlfriend. I was in love with him. Some of these things I did out of jealousy, or out of an attempt to keep his fidelity. But at some point that changed. And so
Yeah.
that's going to be very important in a case like this. And so that's going to be one of the things that the jury is really going to have to pay attention to and answering the question, was this a RICO? Like, was this a conspiracy? And did he utilize all of these enterprises to keep this thing going?
So that's why it's important, like when the assistants testified and said that, I think it was one part where they asked him, when he went to go pick up drugs, was it in his name? And he was like, yes. And they was like, did you know? Did you give him consent to put the drugs, like the Percocets, in your name? And he was like, no. So that's where it goes back to, he hired these people through the company, and then he's disguising his activities, his criminal activities, using these people. Go ahead, Trey.
Absolutely.
No, I was gonna say, I was gonna ask you whether or not you thought it was fair to for them to do this as a RICO case. This is, celebrity, high profile type deal, and you were saying that most of the time RICOs deal with gang activities and mob like movements. But it had me thinking, and that's why I keep going back to like the spiritual side of things, because I think with that whole entertainment industry, there is a demonic Illuminati type cult like rituals and stuff that they do, which a lot of people, I don't think that's been talked about, but I do think that is.
You think they would go around with goat heads?
No, they do make. No, I think like when we was talking about the movie Sinners, and remember when the mom was like, "That's not your brother no more. That's something else." I think when you said something along the lines that changed in their relationship, I'm not saying what it was, but it gives a sense that a lot of organized crime is going on in that industry that nobody is talking about because they're protecting certain powers. That
Just the sex traffic alone, I think it's sex trafficking, drugs is
they go hand in hand, right?
Yeah, and money laundering, like that's huge in the music industry, because they can say, oh yeah, I paid them $2.5 million for a beat.
Mhm.
It's easy. I mean, who can put a monetary value on that? Because the fluctuation in the amount of money that it takes to make these beats, and takes, it's whatever the person is willing to pay and whatever the person is willing to charge. It's like art. It's really no monetary value on it unless I place it on it, and it's whatever you're willing to pay me.
So in a
I'll
situation,
say this with regards to, I'm sorry, I will say this with regards to the RICO case, though. It's not a decision, state or federally, that prosecutors come to lightly. When there's just so much going on with one person at the center, that's typically the most appropriate charge, like I said, because when you do it individually, you're essentially having a trial on each of the offenses. When you do it with the RICO, everything is coming in, all aspects of it, because it is a web. It is a web. It's a lot of different things. But from the legal standpoint, I think this case is not just about individual misconduct, but how the law really addresses abuse of power and the limits of celebrity insulation from accountability. Really, the capacity of the criminal justice system to deliver justice in tandem with it. And so
Okay.
I think it's interesting to look at.
what do you
So
say
like,
to
go ahead, Trey. I'm sorry.
what do you say to that person that say when it pertains to Cassie and the abuse, and they go like, well, at some point she could have just walked away. Have you seen anything similar to where like it was just that easy to walk away from, or what do you say to that listener who has that thought process?
Well, I will say this, it's easy to judge from the outside things that we haven't experienced personally, right? And if you haven't been in the shoes of a domestic violence victim or been close enough to one to know really the dynamics of that abusive power dynamic, then I could see how someone would question that. But you really have to think about it, whether you're dealing with someone who had access to millions like Diddy, or you're dealing with, a woman married to a blue collar worker living in your regular neighborhood who's a stay at home mom, and she doesn't have access to resources or money or things like that. And she has small children. I don't know about anybody, but it's hard to pick up and go anywhere in this day and age, right? It costs money. And if you don't have finances to just pick up and go, there are a lot of people stuck in situations because they're not only victims of domestic violence, but essentially economic slavery. There's someone else holding the purse strings. So you can't just pick up and go, because walking out your front door costs $100 every day, right? And so I think it's easier said than done, but that's why we have things out there like, women's shelters and domestic violence shelters. Those places have very limited resources and they are typically tapped out because there's such a significant need for them. So it's, like I said, it's easy to judge from the outside.
Mhm.
But if we're just looking at this situation, where can you go or where can you hide from someone who has unlimited resources? Diddy can go anywhere and be anywhere. He has a private jet. He has people, he has a fleet of staff. He can be anywhere. There's nowhere you can really hide or go that he cannot find you or at least know where you are.
So a lot of people will say, and I've said it too. At some point, she stopped becoming a victim. Is that true? It's like where is there a line where you're no longer a victim but you're a perpetrator of the crime? Is there a difference?
I'm not certain about perpetrator is probably not the right word, but I think some people would quite naturally question at what point do you go from victim to enabler
Mhm.
or a willing participant, right? And so that's a question that the jury is going to have to struggle with ultimately. And as the finders of fact, that is what their jobs are, right? They're going to look at everything from the weight of her testimony. They're going to look at her body language. They're going to be questioning everything. But that's why those 12 people are in the box to make those type of determinations. Those of us who do not have the luxury of sitting in the courtroom and listening to all of the evidence, so we have a very limited view. We can only guess so much, right? And so it's a hard job, but it's one that they're charged with doing. So they're going to have to make that determination for themselves and individually.
Okay. See, Trey, look,
No,
there
no.
is. I told you, it's a point. It becomes a point when you
He
no
sound like
longer a
he was,
victim. When you no longer a victim. Now I'm just saying, like, she is a victim. I never said she wasn't.
Mhm.
Like, my opinion was Diddy's, to me, just me as a civilian, everybody knew Diddy was on some bogus stuff. It's been said for years. And now
I
somebody
didn't know that boy
finally
got
came.
raped. You know, he got by a priest, a Catholic priest, when he was a kid.
I don't
Yeah.
doubt it though. I don't doubt it.
I
But
thought that was wild.
but do they take that into consideration?
He
Is
might
that brought
probably
up?
go
Is
crazy
that
later on.
Well, who knows? That I could see maybe that being brought up as let's say, and we're very far from this, right? Let's say I could only see those types of claims coming up to serve as mitigation, maybe if he's found guilty, right? So things like that, his personal history, maybe if he was the victim of sexual abuse in the past as a child, some of those things could be brought up in the context of mitigating as mitigation for sentencing. But like I said, we're a very long way away from that. And so, but it could come up. But I will say, and I've made this argument before in certain cases, that is an argument that some predators have made in some cases that I have.
well,
But
it
my
happened to
rebuttal,
me.
true. But my rebuttal to that is although that terrible thing has happened, if we look at statistically, women have been the victims of sexual abuse as children far greater than men. However, women are not the main perpetrators of child sexual abuse.
Well,
So
that's what I
there's no direct correlation in being a victim and later on being a perpetrator. But I do see how it could be brought up in mitigation if he's later found guilty.
I have a question. Like, so where did these charges come from? Was it stemming from, like, I don't know this portion. Like, has there ever been a a time where a criminal or civil case
Mhm.
made the feds go, nah, we got to do this criminal. We're gonna do this criminal too. Like, has there ever been a time?
Well, I will say that there are instances where civil and criminal investigations overlap. And when that happens, a lot of times, and we're seeing more frequently, that the civil case is brought first.
Mm-hmm.
And civilly, and so when that overlap occurs, we do see civilly that with the civil case, they're typically more constrained by evidentiary and procedural limits, right? But if there is a parallel criminal investigation, that parallel criminal investigation can uncover tons of new evidence through federal subpoenas, search warrants, and through cooperation agreements with witnesses. So sometimes the civil case kind of can serve as a, hey, did y'all hear about this? Or did you see that this is going on? And when it does, the investigative agency will do their due diligence to see what is going on and if this somehow has any criminal implications. And if it does, then they are duty bound to further that investigation. And sometimes that can be complicated by NDAs, non-disclosure agreements in the civil context. But
so how does that work? Explain. So
that's a
say,
civil vehicle, and I'm a criminal gal, but I will say this, NDA can be overcome by the power of a federal subpoena. There's just
Yeah,
no ways around it. You know,
that
you
boy
can
had
sign that
everybody on
piece
it.
of paper saying that you want talk about this or you won't do that. But when you're served with a federal subpoena, there are certain obligations that are due there.
do
And
I have to,
typically,
if I go to court and talk about it, if you subpoenaed me, do I have to pay the money? Can the person still try to get the money from me?
How many NDAs you got?
Don't worry about
Sound
all
like
that.
that boy sound like he trying to get some
I'm
legal
afraid
help
to
real
ask.
quick.
Don't worry about all that.
He might
But
be one of them on the Diddy list.
I know. But it just depends. But that's something that's highly litigated when that occurs.
Yeah, because I'm like, if I walk in there, y'all subpoena me, and I go, man, I got a $50 million NDA. Is y'all gonna pay that fee if I talk?
Well, I guess you have a choice. You can abide by the subpoena, or you could subject yourself to contempt of court and go to federal prison, whichever one
Yeah.
you desire.
How long I get? Cause 50 million a lot. I ain't got 50 million. I wanted to.
Last I checked, freedom is priceless.
True.
You talked earlier about the jury selection and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular case, like how does that jury selection process work? And do you think, like, in the beginning of this trial, they were saying that was one of the more complicated part of them selecting a juror that's not going to know who he is and can be fair? Do you think that they may did it right on this one?
I'm sure they did, or you can almost guarantee they did their best, right? And when it comes to a trial like this, when you have somebody who's a celebrity, essentially a global celebrity, right? You're going to be hard pressed to find someone who has not heard of him or who has not seen him on television or maybe even bought some of his products, especially in New York, right?
He had the keys to the city.
Yeah, well,
He was the king
He
of the
ran
city.
New York. Remember when he actually ran New York?
Right. He's considered the king of New York. But I will say this with regard to that, it's voir dire is very important. And voir dire is the process by which we pick and question potential jurors. So when you're looking at that, it's going to be imperative for all of the attorneys, prosecution and defense, to question those jurors to ferret out any preconceived notions or biases that they may have when it comes to him. Because not everybody doesn't
in a
like
case
it.
like this, how do you figure that out though? Like, cause that boy,
You do it through your questioning, right? So you make sure that you ask the right questions when you're screening them. So like I said, that process is to screen for biases and to try to seek an impartial jury. So they're going to question jurors, or they've already questioned jurors, rather, about their exposure to media coverage, their ability to set aside preconceived notions, whether they have strong opinions or connections to the case. And if they do, those people could be struck for what we call cause, or each side gets a limited number of peremptory challenges. I just don't like the way this person looks, so I want them off. So you're going to give up, but it's really, it's a game of strategy because you only get a certain number of those strikes. And so a person can be struck for cause. You get unlimited numbers of those, but the peremptory challenges, you have a very limited number. So when you're looking at the jury, it's like chess. You're trying to anticipate who the other side is going to cut. And then if I cut this person, who I'm going to be left with. So you essentially have to be thinking 8 steps ahead in the jury selection process. And honestly, your case is lost, won or lost in jury selection. So it's very important.
That's I wonder what his jury makeup is. What if they all what if it just happened to be all white people?
It just happens to be all white people.
No, it can't. The demographics of Manhattan.
Right. When you're looking at
both of them picked, right? Like,
Yeah.
how's that divided? Is it 50-50?
Well, it depends on what the pool looks like, right? And so typically you get, okay, you have, sometimes in
Niggas
some
ain't
cases
showing up
you have
anyway.
you have 6 and they have 12, or you have 6 and they have 6, and we go from there. So I'm like, okay, so I'm counting how many they've already used. So I'm like, well, they've already used 5. They can only use 1 more. So if I cut this person, or if I leave this person, I'm going to force their hand. I'm telling you, it's like a game of strategy. If I leave this person, I know the defense doesn't like this person. So I'm going to force their hand to use their last strike to cut this one. And that's going to give me these 3 people who I really want on the back end. That's why I say
So-
that the case is won and lost in jury selection. But in a high profile case like this, the courts can use jury questionnaires. Like they'll send, it could be a packet of questions where they're asking you, what news media do you watch? Have you heard of Diddy? What's your opinion of him? Do you like him? Do you hate him? All these different things. And what that often does is help you expand your voir dire process to protect yourself against stealth jurors who have hidden agendas. So there's all kind of ways. So in addition to the questionnaires, you're going to have some people who say, I can't come. I have a prepaid vacation. I'm going to be out. There's so many things that are going to take place during that jury process. But then when everybody's out of strikes and everybody's done their challenges for cause, who you're left with is who you're left with.
So how long before the jury selection process do y'all get the pool of who's going to be the jurors so y'all can do y'all home? Basically, essentially your recruiting and your scouting report.
It depends. It could be a couple of months or a couple of days. It just depends.
So do you like, you see in the movies, is it true like they have those companies that go out and like private eyes basically? Wow.
Yeah, there are a lot
Is
of
that
jury
legal?
I don't know about the private eye part because I've never used that, but there are people who you can hire as jury consultants, who can come in and look at your pool and say, okay, you don't want this person, you don't want that person, but essentially, as a career prosecutor, I'm my own jury consultant. I know who I want on what type of case and who I don't want on one type of case. And in the jury selection process, they're going to ask you everything. Have you ever been the victim of a crime? Have you ever been the perpetrator of a crime? Do you have any relatives who are currently in jail? Do you feel that they were treated fairly by the criminal justice system? What's your opinion of prosecutors? What's your opinion of police? It's a range of questions.
How many shares of baby oil stock you got?
That too, that might come up in this case.
So if you can, are you able, because a lot of people are under the impression that when Cassie filed a civil case, that's what triggered a criminal case and it led to them doing a raid on all of his estate. Is that true? Or because some things I read, they said that they've been watching him since like 2008.
Oh yeah, when he started pissing off the liquor people, that's when he got on the radar.
I can't speak to whether her civil suit actually triggered the criminal investigation. It could have. Who knows? Or like you say, this could be an ongoing thing that people have just been, where somebody their name comes up over the years. It could be that type of situation. But I think what's unique to her situation is that the allegations were just so explosive. And then when you couple that with the hotel video that came out shortly thereafter, it's like, look, nobody can turn a blind eye to this, right? So somebody has to look into it. So I can't say for certain that her civil case is what actually initiated the criminal investigation, but seeing how extensive that it is, we're probably looking at an investigation that's been around for some time.
So say for instance, if he would have settled it, would it have came across the federal prosecutors? Like, would it risen to the occasion, or y'all wouldn't even known about it?
So you're saying that if they didn't settle, or that her attorneys hadn't
Brought it out to the public,
leaked the video, would we have ever seen a criminal case? That's what
Yeah.
you're asking. Who knows, right?
Yeah,
Who
'cause
knows?
it's a lot that's involved with, because of RICO. Like, he had so much other criminal activity that was
It
going on.
is. Like I said, I can't say that her civil case initiated the criminal one, but it could have been a very big cherry on top.
That's
From
go ahead.
at this stage right now, like, all the information that's out, how do you think the juror is like deciding? Like, what do you think their decision would be like as of now, like
Well,
leaning towards?
hopefully nothing. Because if we think about it, and I know it's hard to think about it this way without being, well, I have the luxury of being in the system so long, so this is the only way I think about it. But every criminal defendant starts the case with the presumption of innocence. The evidence is not foreclosed. So as we stand right now, Diddy is innocent. Nothing has been proven. It is not until the prosecution rests their case or closes their case in chief that they then have the defense also, that they then go into deliberations. Until then, until you have received all of the evidence in this case, which could be physical, could be financial records, witness testimony, until all of that evidence is in and you've deliberated on it, he has the presumption of innocence. If you told him today, we're going to cut everything off, you're not going to get it. You got, even at the start of this case, and that's a question a lot of times I would ask jurors during voir dire. If I sent you in the back to vote right now on John Doe's guilt or innocence, what would be your vote? Well, I'm hoping they say not guilty. And I know that's strange to hear from a career prosecutor, but I haven't presented any evidence. He has the presumption of innocence. So until all of that evidence is taken in and until they deliberate on all of it, he has the presumption of innocence. And that is our system working.
You know,
Could you
like
give? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jay.
I was just thinking about like the Tory Lane situation. A lot of times, like in the pub, it seems
The
like
court of public opinion.
right get weighed in into the courtroom, and like as a prosecutor, like how do you like balance that media pressure? You know what I'm saying? Like when you got like all these different outside forces that's weighing in on what's going on and control the outcome of the case. Like as a prosecutor, like how do you know you deal with that?
Well, I'll say like this. When public opinion is inflamed or a case is essentially being tried in the court of public opinion, which is often in high profile cases like this one, right? We really rely on a series of constitutional and procedural safeguards to protect due process because every person, regardless of how egregious the crimes are that they're being alleged, is to ensure that they have a fair trial. That is my job. In addition to, or that was my job, in addition to getting justices to ensure that the defendant has a fair trial. And so there are several safeguards that work in practice for that. One we've already discussed, which is jury selection or the voir dire process. And that's to screen for any biases that may be present in any potential jurors. So we're going to use our challenges for cause, our peremptory challenges. We're going to use the written questionnaires to make sure that we get a fair jury that will listen to all of the evidence. If you have a situation where you're concerned about the court of public opinion, you may want to consider a change of venue. That's another procedural safeguard. You want to find a jury pool that's less tainted by any local media saturation. But with a case as high profile as this, we're way beyond local media saturation. We're global media saturation.
Because they had the raid all on national TV. It was breaking
Right.
news. It was like everywhere. They had them at the
Right.
airport walking around.
Yeah, they
Either
got
party
people
can
down like
request
that.
either party can request that the trial be moved to a different federal district. But when you're dealing with someone who's, like I said, a global mogul, where can you go where no one has ever heard of him? But in addition to that, there's also gag orders to prevent parties, attorneys, or potential witnesses from making any public statements that could influence the trial. And most importantly, sequestration of the jury, which I believe is enacted in this case. And that's to shield the jurors from any outside influence during trial. So they typically don't have access to cell phones. They don't have access to the internet. There are no televisions in their hotel rooms because they don't go home each night. They go to a hotel room. So their families can't talk about the case with them or anything like that. So when a jury, it's typically in extreme cases that they're sequestered, but they're typically kept in a hotel, no media access, no real contact with the outside world until a verdict is rendered. And the judges instruct you daily when you come into court. The jurors, before they're seated, the judge instructs them again, to avoid any media, avoid any internet searches or discussions of the case with anyone. And if they violate that, it could result in a mistrial or it could result in that juror being dismissed from the case.
How could
So-
they know though?
Hmm?
How could they know? Like, how can they know if you violate that? Like, it's like it's everywhere.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, we can take your phone. Well, I won't say we. The
Okay.
judge can take your phone. The judge can take your laptop. Like I said, if you're in a hotel, they can ask that, all internet access be disabled for that floor or for those rooms and things
Yeah.
like that. There are ways they can
But
do it.
when you're
And
dealing with, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And you just ask them. Some people will just tell you the truth, surprisingly enough. Yes, I talked to so and so about it. Or, yeah, I may have mentioned it. Or there have been instances where people have come and reported it to the court. Hey, I know this person. I know you ordered them to not say anything, but I was around them and they mentioned something, or I saw them talking to a juror, and that's it.
Are they trying to get their
So,
homeboy off?
so what about so people like Diddy? Diddy got money, right?
hmm
Is there a concern that he could pay a person that is serving them food and send them a message while he's serving them the food? Like he could pay for influence by.
hmm
I mean, you got money, you can essentially buy people, right, to do things for you, to send a message, so to speak. Is there a concern for that?
And jail?
I think that's probably
No,
a concern.
in the jury process, you send it you up there, you just ordered a burger, you just got back from court, you ordered a burger, it's the day before you supposed to start deliberating, and next thing you know,
They send you a
the
video
dude
of
that
kids
deliver
in the
you a
car get
burger
blown.
sends you a message, and they got a message with your kids tied up, and they say if you say anything,
Take that.
That's a Biggie Small lyric, right? Your daughter's tied up in a Brooklyn basement. That's what
see,
you're
he
referring
might be
to, right?
living it out. He might be living it out. You know what I'm saying? He might be living it out.
Hey, they say he
I think that's
sacrificed
a
Biggie.
concern. Oh God, let's not go there. They that could be a concern. I won't even say that that's a concern that would be specific to somebody like Diddy. That's a concern for probably every criminal case when you have someone with some level of influence or access or ability. So I wouldn't say that's something that would be specific to him, but we all know that power, wealth, and influence can significantly complicate the pursuit of justice.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so important as the prosecutor to maintain the integrity of the process. That is a non negotiable. We want to ensure a fair trial and an impartial investigation, regardless of a person's status, whether it's very high or very low. That's central to the mission. And so integrity is the benchmark. And that's what we're going to
I think
always
that's the
strive.
toughest part with this though, because
Absolutely.
the amount of the list of names and the amount of power that he had, and people who are on those lists don't want stuff
Well,
to leak.
so let's talk about that a little bit. So what do you do, right? In a case like this, when you have power, wealth, influence, and all of those things. So how do you keep the integrity, right? So one thing that I'm pretty sure the prosecution is going to do is anchor everything to the evidence. Status doesn't change the facts, and it doesn't change the standard. Facts and law drive decisions. So whether that person is a celebrity or unknown defendant, we are going to rely on the witness statements. We're going to rely on the financial records. We're going to rely on the surveillance. We're going to rely on the forensic analysis, and we're going to apply that to the law. No case moves forward without sufficient evidence. We don't base it on media pressure, not politics, or not public opinion. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, we move on. Also, utilizing the grand jury system to maintain independence. So, especially in federal cases, the grand jury is a great way to gather evidence, to issue subpoenas, and to weigh the charges. They're essentially like a practice jury for you. So they operate in secrecy, which helps shield the process from public and political influence. And the grand jury can investigate for months or years.
Yeah.
Right? So that allows prosecutors to test the credibility of the case, identify any evidentiary gaps, and ensure that all of the evidence that they're procuring supports probable cause without outside interference, because these things are happening in secret. And so when you do that, you have to walk a very strict line in building a wall between politics and prosecution, between celebrity and prosecution, and between wealth and prosecution, right? None of those things should impact our charging decisions. And we want to always, always protect the legitimacy of the investigation and the rights of the accused. And it is
So
hard to do.
You've been giving your briefs and you've been very detailed. So where do you think we're at in the case? Like, can you give a summary of what happened so far?
I don't know if I can give a summary because this has been 2 weeks of trial evidence, so that's a lot of stuff. But I will say this. If you're looking at this case and what has happened so far, like I said, it's only been 2 weeks. So if we were to look at this case like a baby, I'd say we're at toddler stage right now. We're at toddler stage right now. So we're still, I don't know about that, but we're still building the case. Every person that they put up there, every piece of evidence is another brick in the wall, So they're going to add another brick. They're going to add another brick until at the end of it, we're going to have this big, huge wall or this building that you're looking at. That's how cases are built, brick by brick by brick. And that takes time. So I would say, like I said, if we were considering this case, like a baby, right now we're at the toddler stage. So next week and in the coming weeks, you're probably going to see them kind of step on the gas, and you're going to hear you're going to hear a lot more evidence. I anticipate they're probably going to be, I wouldn't say they're surprise witnesses to the prosecution and defense, but there are going to be some witnesses.
Who y'all think about to come out?
Who knows?
Magic Johnson?
I don't know. Who knows? But I think there are going to be some witnesses that the public will probably be surprised that are being called. But like I said, there are no surprises for the parties involved. But we're going to see. It's going to be a roller coaster ride. I think it's going to be interesting. They started with Cassie, and I think that may be because, I'll say this, every prosecutor has their own style and how they present their case, but we typically are the same on a few things. You just kind of start at the beginning and build it up. And there's usually, you get to this high point. We haven't gotten to that high point yet. I think a lot of people thought that Cassie would be the high point. But when you look at what she testified to and the fact that she's pregnant, I think that was a huge factor in having her go first. It's because she's a delicate witness.
Which witness do you think came out there and was like, oh man, I hate I brought him out because he done messed up everything so far?
From what I've seen thus far, I don't think we've had that kind of moment yet. But like I said, we probably got about 6 weeks left. So
they said the mama has some smoke now.
So
Cassie's mom?
Yeah.
He's been hung up on Cassie's mama.
She has some smoke.
Yeah, but if we, that's just the drama of trial, right? That's just a part of the theatrics of trial. But if you look at it strictly from an evidentiary standpoint, what did she help prove or disprove?
Thank you. She gave the 20 racks back. She got them 20 racks back. I want to ask you this question. Out of the 2 weeks, give me your high and low for the prosecution and your high and low for the defense that you've seen, like the highlights, like some good, like you're like, oh yeah, that was good. Or nah.
As far as the prosecution, of course, I think Cassie is the high thus far. I think when you look at her testimony, regardless of what you may feel about her personally, she came off as a great witness. She was credible. And if we're honest and just looking at the evidence, she has some things to corroborate her. It's not like we just had Cassie's word alone. It was Cassie's word paired with travel records, Cassie's word paired with hotel records, Cassie's word paired with fruits of the search warrants that were served at Diddy's house, right?
Yeah.
Their relationship ended years ago. Those search warrants were recently executed, and guess what? She said there would be drugs in the house, and years later, we're finding drugs in the house. So I think that's
be under the table.
And there's baby oil inside. Right. So she's being corroborated, even though she's years removed from the alleged abuse. So that's significant. That's significant. So
not freezer
I
meat.
give that as a high.
Freezer meat wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that's probably a low, right? Just with the
who would that be a low for? The prosecutor? Because they brought him, right? They brought him.
Freezer meat got book deals going on and everything right now.
But look, think about it this way also. They could have easily not called him, right? They could have easily not called him, but they did. Because guess what? If what he says happened, it happened. Regardless of what book deals he has and everything else. If what he says can be, right, if what he says can be corroborated by independent evidence, he's a credible witness.
But he was paid for sex, which is illegal. So that goes into the RICO charge.
Freezer meat was giving out too much information.
So, you know what I'm saying? At the end of the day.
But that's just the nature of it. As a prosecutor, I don't get to pick who my witnesses are. They are who they are. They're the people who were there. And so you do yourself a disservice by trying to sanitize it by saying, there are no perfect witnesses. There are only people who were there when it happened and people who were not. And that's what we're stuck with. And so I don't see any problems with them calling him.
So do you think there has been a bombshell yet? Because
No,
that's
not
like
yet.
that's like a trigger word, and like a lot of people do that to get you to click. That's the clickbait. So
Hmm.
from your experience, your trial experience, being a federal prosecutor, has there been a bombshell yet in the Diddy case?
Nothing to make me blush.
Okay.
Any bombshell predictions?
No, none on my part. See, that's the beauty of trial. You can't predict it. It's unpredictable. I often describe trial to people as skipping through a minefield. You never you never know what's gonna happen because it's the human element of it. You can't control what people are gonna say or what they're gonna do. You can only prepare for what you think is gonna happen and prepare for what may happen. And so that's just the nature of trial. It's volatile, it's unpredictable, and so you have to stay on your toes at all times.
I got a question, and I always wanted to know how this works.
Okay.
How does witness protection work?
Trying to get some legal help again.
No, I just
Now,
wanted.
that's I have no problem saying knowing what I know and not knowing what I don't know. And that's a very secret process
Okay.
that's actually it's on both levels. It's on state and federal level. So it'll work differently on both. Of course, on the federal level, you'll sometimes have federal agencies involved, and each one will have their own version of witness protection, right? Whether it be Secret Service, whether it be FBI, ATF, Homeland Security, all of them will have their own version of it. And on the state side, where you're dealing with a lot more limited resources, this protection could just be helping you get a hotel for a month or two, or things like that. But on the federal side, that's where you have like witness protection, witness relocation, things like that. All of those things are
I think you want to
different.
know how much they get paid. Because I think
No,
Nova's
I ain't no snitch.
God.
No, hey, I got this question too. All right.
Okay.
Well, you always hear these deals. Has there ever been a time where you said, nah, I ain't making no deal. Take that trial. We're going to trial. Have you ever said it like that? You like, hell no, we're going to trial. Take that.
Well, I'll say this. First of all, yes, I play Mr. Big's time to go to trial before every trial, just to let you know. Because you just mentioned that, and that's just how I do. But it's the defendant's prerogative if he wants to go to trial. It's his choice. It's his choice. I don't get to, as a prosecutor, I don't get to control whether a person goes to trial or not. Now, there are certain instances where we are in plea negotiations, and if those break down, then there's no other alternative but to go to trial. And so, yeah, I've been in that situation several times where plea negotiations have broken down, and we have to let a jury make the determination.
What
But
would be your
and I was gonna ask, you say you never make the decision, but with your client, you say, "Oh, this is my best recommendation." Is that a practice, or that's just on the
well, I've
scene and
never been a
moves?
defense attorney, so I've never been on
Okay.
that side of
Okay, yeah, my
having
bad.
to have that hard conversation. But I will say there have been situations where I have to point out the strength of my case to others to help them see the light. But again, it's still their
shit, son?
choice. Yeah.
You think
I mean, it
you
doesn't
think plea
matter.
deals are done too often in federal cases?
No.
No.
Do you prefer pleas or trials? Are you nice when you do plea deals? Do you like, man, this is, you don't want to go to trial with me, bro? So
The
take this.
plea is contingent on the strength of the evidence. And if you've been indicted, the evidence is good and strong.
Okay. So I'm just trying to learn how you get a good plea. You know what I'm saying? Like
Well, the
what?
best plea is not being charged, which means
Yeah,
don't do the crime.
exactly. That's the number one. But you know what I'm saying? You want to go in there and negotiate. You don't want life. Can you just give me 5 so I could be home in 2?
Yeah, no. Well, there are lots of different ways that plea negotiations can manifest themselves, whether it's a lesser charge, whether there's some level of cooperation. All of those things will be taken into account when you're looking at a criminal case. And also whether that crime has a victim attached to it. Of course, their concerns and what they would like to see is always going to be paramount as well. So it's very nuanced, and it's going to vary on a case-by-case basis.
How do
What
prosecuting crime in Louisiana different from other regions? I always hear people saying about like the justice
Well, I can
system in
tell you this,
Louisiana and the criminal.
the biggest difference is that in Louisiana, life is life. We don't typically have like other states where there's, oh, it's 25 to life, or if there's a range attached to it.
what does
No,
that mean? 25 to life.
You did.
that the lowest you can get is 25 and the maximum you can get is life, and that there's a
Okay.
period of, once you've served a period of portion of time, you could be considered for probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. But let's say, for instance, like one of the biggest differences is second degree murder in Louisiana is a automatic life sentence without benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of
Damn,
sentence.
for
It is
second?
natural. Yes, for second degree murder.
Yeah, but
In
And
Cal- in Canada,
up until a couple of years ago, you could be convicted with a 10-2 verdict.
that was a big thing. That was
Yeah.
it's
And
huge.
so, but yeah, we were one of only 2 states, I believe, that were left that had non-unanimous jury verdicts. But of course, that has now changed, and a unanimous jury verdict is required. But a person could be convicted by a vote of 10-2.
how do you
But yeah,
balance justice with mercy? You know what I mean? Like like when you prosecuting like
If you'd
young
have got here
offenders or
earlier,
first
you
time
would have
defendants.
known. She would have gave that. She answered that.
We wasn't recording, so that was off the record. So on the record,
well, I'll say this: this isn't one size fits all. It's not one size fits all. And then if you just if you consider, my background, I'm a Louisiana girl. My parents are both from very rural areas of the state, although I kind of grew up in a more urban part of it. So I personally take a very nuanced, community-centered approach to prosecution or justice. You just have to understand the people that you're serving and what justice means to them and what they hope for. Crime often coexists with poverty, with lack of education, or with systemic inequalities. So when you consider all of that and where I'm from and how I was brought up and raised, it really forced me to think critically about when to prosecute firmly and when to seek alternatives to that. And so in doing that, you have to look at everyone as an individual and look at their cases individually. Like I said, it's not one size fits all. So I believe that my personal brand of justice must be very firm against violence and exploitation, but also compassionate and restorative when it's appropriate.
Most definitely. So with that, I think of have you ever ran across the instance where what happens if you know someone?
hmm
Like a case come across your desk and you like, I know this person. Do you pass it along to another prosecutor?
You can, depending on, the nature of your relationship. Cause like, I know them, but do I know them? Like, have they been to my house? Have they babysat my children? Things like that. And where we're from, everybody knows everybody, right?
Everybody.
So
Everybody.
it's almost inevitable, especially when I was a state prosecutor, that a case would come across my desk every now and then. I'm like, "Oh, I went to school with him. Oh, I know that person. That's so and so's cousin or brother or whatever." So it's inevitable, really, when you're practicing in your hometown, that you're going to know somebody or be connected to them in some kind of way. But again, just like I said, I think it's important to balance that and to understand the situation that you sit in as a prosecutor. Yes, I know them. So that means I may have a unique view into this person and maybe what they were going through at the time, or if they were having a personal crisis, or he's not really a criminal. He's stupid, but he's not really a criminal. So it's in situations like that where you know them and you may not feel comfortable keeping the case because, there is a personal relationship or connection, that you could give it to someone else and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I don't feel comfortable taking this case because I know this person, but I would like to let you know that if you could give him a break, give him one. If
Okay.
you can,
Gotcha.
I think everybody should help somebody if they can.
But you could prosecute it still if you wanted to.
Right. It's going to depend on the nature and the significance of the relationship. If this is somebody who happened to share a pew with me at church every couple of months, then, that's not enough to be a quote unquote conflict. But if it's
Okay.
someone who I break bread with regularly, I know them, they visited my home, I visited my home, that's something you definitely want to conflict out.
What if it's like an ex-boyfriend, but they were like in like high
I think you
school?
want to conflict out with that one because it may not be an actual impropriety, but sometimes the appearance of impropriety is much worse. So just pass it on.
Gotcha. Some things I think listeners would want to know is you see a lot of cases with law enforcement where the person dies from a law enforcement involved shooting, and it doesn't seem to lead to conviction, and people always wonder why. Like, what is going through? How are they able to, like, most of the time walk away? Because we just had one, and I think it was Ohio somewhere.
I won't say that I will say this because I have a lot of colleagues who have prosecuted those types of cases and they have been successful. I will say that a lot of times the media coverage on an acquittal is much more louder than the coverage on a conviction. So that may be a little bit of a misconception. There are great people out there who are doing the hard work in those cases and who are bringing them to grand juries every day and holding people accountable. But I will say they are probably some of the most difficult cases to prosecute and prosecute successfully just because of how nuanced they are and because of all of the different layers that are involved with them. And I think you would probably agree, in a case where it's an officer involved shooting, a lot of times people feel that the victim is being prosecuted or somehow judged more than the perpetrator. And so those cases are very nuanced, and I can see how public opinion regarding them seems to be, well, wait, what's happening here? There doesn't seem to be a lot of traction with these cases, or they don't seem to result in a lot of convictions. But I always use it as my opportunity to encourage everyone. Remember that when their jury summons comes in the mail.
Exactly. I tell people,
And
oh,
you
it burns
have
me
the
up.
opportunity to listen to the evidence, to weigh it, and to bring all of your personal experiences to the table. Remember that.
Definitely. Trey, you back from the bathroom? You got anything to say?
Yeah, man, fresh off the stool. Have you ever turned down a case or walked away from a case because you like, this is unjust, or you didn't felt a certain way about it, or politically like
time.
motivated?
Not politically motivated, but I will say I have no qualms, and most of my colleagues, all of my colleagues rather, have no problems dismissing a case, not proceeding with the investigation if the evidence is not there. That is the system working. And like I said, and that's what's paramount, is maintaining the integrity of the entire process. We're not to be swayed by political influence. We're not to be swayed by status, whether someone is considered elite or if they're considered to be of a lower socioeconomic status. None of that should be a part of the charging decision-making process. What does the evidence show? And so I've had instances where I've had to call in people and say, look, I know you say that this is a bad guy, or you say that this, but I'm not seeing it. And so I'm going to pass.
Have you ever received any threats during like somebody trying to influence your decision on a case?
No.
Oh.
She's like, I got that file on me, boy, I'm good.
All right, exactly.
So
I do want
to go ahead.
And this is it's another recent case that just came up with the Tyree Nichols verdict. What's your take on that one?
Again, I think that goes, I'll just say this, like I just said, those are very hard cases to try. But again, it's not the prosecutor making the decision. It's not even the defense counsel making the decision. It's 12 people in the box that are making the decision. And all 12 of those people are coming with individual life experiences, individual preconceived notions that we try to ferret out in the voir dire process. But that's really a question for the jury. The only thing that we can ask of the attorneys, which was done in that case, is that they present the best case that they have. And they did that. But ultimately, we cannot control the decision. And it's frustrating sometimes. It really is. But again, I have to champion it every chance that I get. This is why it is imperative for everyone to serve on a jury, jury service is one of the most important aspects of our civic duty as American citizens. We all have the right, once we turn 18 years or older, if we can read and write the English language and we have not been subjected to a felony conviction, we all have the right to sit in that box and make determinations regarding facts and law. And so, again, I champion everyone to do that and encourage them to do so. When you get that summons in the mail, we all have things to do. It's not easy for anybody to, get up and make the long drive or do what you have to do for a week or a couple of
I'm going.
days, but do it. Yeah,
I'm
do
going.
it.
I'm
Do
He
pulling
it.
going
up.
to be
One of the
Nova
most
going to be nosy. He ain't going.
That's my civic duty. I'm going to do my dang on me civic duty, man. I would want somebody
That's
to give
right.
me a fair shot,
Well,
right?
exactly. And that's the beauty of the process, is that we're all individuals. We all have our different paths that life has taken us on. So that means that each one of us are going to view evidence differently. So why not have that? The one thing I always ask people is, if you were sitting in the defendant's chair, would you want someone like you serving on your jury?
Absolutely.
There you go.
Absolutely.
But you
I'll
might,
take
you
it.
might weed me
I need
out.
12 of
I
me.
might be the one like,
I
yeah, they
need-
got to get that nigga out of here, boy. He gonna be the one that
Nah,
might got some
because I bring
biases.
logic. I want to hear everything, and I bring logic, and I break it down, and I see the evidence for the evidence. Like what it does, the charge and the evidence meet what
Evidence support the charge.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
and that I would end all
that's
of
how
my
we
closing
determine it.
arguments. Yeah, I would end all of my closing arguments asking the jury to say the same thing. I ask that you render the only verdict that is consistent with the evidence, which is guilty as charged.
How do you like there's just one system I think it needs to overhaul, like our justice system when it pertains to dealing with, marginalized and blacks, colors, people, underrepresented, whatever. How do you in this day and age respond to like the growing mistrust of the justice system?
Well, I think the only way that you could truly address, you're right, it seems to be a growing trend that people don't trust the system, right? And I think if we have an honest conversation about it, they have a reason that they can assign that mistrust to, right? Because something may have happened in the past, or something may have happened to their family member or someone that they know. And so they have a legitimate mistrust. So how do you try to repair that, right? And to build their confidence back up in the system. And it kind of goes back to what I spoke to earlier about understanding the people that you're serving and what it means to them and what they are essentially hoping for. There have been, especially when I was in state court and dealing with victims of homicides, a lot of times those families had no trust for the system at all. And they just happened to be thrust into it. But that takes us having an honest conversation for like, look, I understand where you're coming from. I know you may not have any trust in this system, but I don't need you to have trust in the system. I need you to have trust in me and know that I'm going to do everything that I can to get justice for you and your loved one. No, I may not can bring them back. No, I may not can undo this horrible thing that may occur. But it starts individually, I think, with just building trust with the person who happens to be in the system. And then we can grow it from there. And so it takes a lot. It takes community prosecution. It takes community policing. It takes us having honest conversations about things when they do go wrong in the community and not minimizing it or, just ignoring it. That helps no one. And that just breeds that mistrust. We have to get to a point where we could talk about these things, talk about them honestly, acknowledge that they're wrong, and then we build the trust. Sometimes that's all it takes. People just want to hear is, that was wrong. I acknowledge it was wrong, and we won't let it happen again.
People egos.
That's step one.
You're right. It's and sometimes it's so simple. Just those steps, those particular steps. Acknowledge the wrongdoing and say, "Hey, I can't change the past, but going forward, let's change it together. This is how we're going to do it and take these steps." But I think a lot of people just go, it's not like we can get to a point where this rhetoric where oh, we hate cops, F the police and all this stuff. If you explain the process to the people and the
Or
cop
defund
stops.
the police. Nobody
Right.
wants to defund the police.
No.
When people, and typically, and I know people, everybody has opinions about that.
Mhm.
And nobody wants to defund the police. We need police. We need people to protect and serve. But what people want to defund is systemic things that happen within the system of policing that are wrong.
Lack of
So,
accountability.
lack of accountability and things like that. Yes, we love our policemen who go out there and truly protect and serve and just want to get home to their families. Because guess what? We want to too. But we also want to see that same level of accountability when it comes to bad actors within those
That's
same
it.
systems.
Right.
And I
And
think,
so that's fair. And
and
that's
that's
what
where they mess it up. I think that's where they drop the ball, is they, instead of saying, putting this person out front and say, hey, they're going to go through the process and this is the process and we're going to hold them accountable. They don't do that. They circle a wagon. You know, the chief or the sheriff get up there and say, this is my officer. No, you should say, hey, we're gonna investigate it and we're gonna do our due diligence and we're gonna make sure that whether innocent or guilty, you're gonna know about it. And we're gonna move past it.
absolutely. And look, I have been fortunate to see some chiefs and sheriffs do exactly that and say, now they can't control what people choose to do individually or because they think this is their brother in blue, right? But I've seen chiefs say, look, they're going to go through the process and this is what it is. And actually, we're going to turn it over to an independent investigating agency. We're not going to investigate our own.
And that's what I think needs to happen.
And that's a great process. Absolutely. And I can honestly say that we have a lot of people, a lot of police departments and sheriff's offices who get it right. And they do just that.
Because
But
you don't
it
want to
needs to
lose the
be
trust of the
amplified
people.
more. You
Yeah,
don't.
you don't
You don't.
want to lose the trust of the people. And I think once you make that on the whole, like somewhere like LAPD, that needs to be standard. And it's not, I'm not trying to sacrifice my cop. What I'm trying to do is I'm protecting everybody else. I got 1,000 other cops I got to worry about. I can't lose 1,000 cops in the trust and the inroads they made in these communities because you as an individual had an error in judging, or you've been called to the carpet, and just let it happen, man. It don't mean I don't love you no less. I don't like you no less. You just got to go through this process.
Yeah, I just think
And you're
it's
essentially
tiered.
dealing with, when you have situations like that, I think a lot of times the public forgets too, is that we have really two different systems at place, because that person, by virtue of their employment, there's a whole other process that they have to go through with regards when things happen like that, either through internal affairs or whoever their independent agency is, or whoever their public integrity unit may be, or their internal affairs or OIG and things like that. So they're really like sometimes 2 or 3 different investigations going on that have 2 or 3 different aims. So it's hard when those situations occur, and it's hard to ask that everybody be patient, especially when you've been wrong. But that time is needed to ferret out all of the facts to find out the truth.
Yep. And this, yeah, 100%. What you got, Trey? What you
No,
gonna
I was
say?
just gonna say I think like the level of corruption is just tiered. Like it's not just in one system. Like you can speak to it in the police system. You can speak to it in the political system, and also in the legal system. Right, when they actually get into the courtrooms, and that distrust in our communities is with all three of those systems. So like, and Nova also said like the church is involved down there where y'all at with the illegal stuff. So if you could change like one thing about like the whole system, or like what would that be, like where would you start?
Actually, I would probably have to say stateside with the state system. And this is what I would change. If I had a magic wand and I could wave it, this is the first thing that I would change, is that I would like to institute in the state criminal justice system, compulsory sentencing guidelines, which means that essentially a judge would be required to sentence all people who are similarly situated the same.
Yes.
I think that kind of helps to balance the system. And we actually have that. It's not compulsory, it's advisory, but we have that system in place on the federal side. We have federal sentencing guidelines, which takes into consideration the offense level. So it's actually a chart. And so what it does is it takes into consideration, depending on what the offense is, a person's criminal history. If there are any specific offense characteristics that'll bump up their number. And so it essentially does this calculation and come with a number. And so any person with that same number at that same level, they're going to be in the same sentencing range. So what that helps to combat is what a lot of people have complained of in the past is that, oh, they knew the judge, so they got a lighter sentence. Or, my cousin did the same thing and he got slammed, but this person got this. We can eliminate a lot of that with compulsory sentencing guidelines and saying, guess what? You don't have to worry about that anymore. Because if your cousin was at a level 6 and that guy was at a level 6, guess what? Because of this, they're going to get the same thing. So that's the first thing that I would change.
All right, I got a question. If you're mentoring a young Black woman studying law today, what would you want her to take away from how you navigated both high stakes law and personal law and your personal values? I'm sorry.
Well, I would probably say that they are one and the same, right? When you enter the practice of law, you don't get to check your emotions and everything at the door. You bring all of that life experience and everything with you. And guess what? You should. All of that should come with you when you're making the charging decisions, when you're weighing people's credibility, when you're interacting with law enforcement. Bring all of that experience with you. Don't check it at the door. Don't think that you have to change self to operate within this system, because the most important pieces of yourself that are those aspects of yourself that you bring with you. You could have been a person with, a less than ideal childhood, a person who could have grown up in the foster system. All of those nuanced life experiences, to me, are what makes a great prosecutor or a great attorney, because you need all of that stuff within you to build those personal relationships, to understand people and just meet them where they are. So don't come into the practice of law thinking, I have to dress a certain way, I have to talk a certain way, I have to carry myself over a certain. I'm still Jamila, from Peabody to the law school to the courtroom to the whatever, right? I still like to do the things that I like to do. But it's all of those things, I think, that make me a better prosecutor, and that will help me to see a side of a victim or a defendant that somebody else can't see, and just help me connect with them on a human level. So I would definitely advise somebody, first of all, never walk into this thinking that you are better than anyone, right?
Mhm.
Because, but for the grace of God, it could have been you on the other side of that courtroom. It could have been them. So remember that. Keep yourself humble and just, thank God for the opportunity that you have. And above all, help anybody that you can when you can within reason. It doesn't hurt to help. It
Man, you
doesn't
got
hurt
me
to help.
one. You got me one. I'm about to go look up law schools, man. I need a second career anyway. I might.
Maybe you could get on the Kim Kardashian program. It only took 6 years, and she didn't have to go to law school.
She a lawyer?
That's what she said the other
Yeah,
day.
bro. She went to IC.
Man, I'm gonna throw both of y'all away.
So now she is for real though. She went to
for
one
real
of them
though.
online
Now I
schools.
love that. I love that. Like you said, be yourself, be who you are, be true to your
Absolutely.
values. Bring all of that experience, those emotions to it, so that it makes you better, and you're doing the fair due diligence on things. Man, I'm telling you, you want to go. I might have to go look up law school, bro. Y'all might
Look, I
disappear for
always
like
say
2-3
if I
years.
can help somebody along this way, then my living shall not be in vain. And that's what it's all about, really. It's just prosecution is public service. If you're the victim of a crime, you shouldn't be tasked with trying to figure out, how am I going to get justice? Who's going to help me? We're here, or people are in place to help you. That should be the last thing that you should be worried about. People are here to help, and people are here to help you, make you whole again, or to get you some modicum of justice, whatever
Yeah,
that looks like.
my niece and nephew just graduated law school actually last week. One
Tell them to
graduated.
come on this. Tell them.
No, they going to like my nephew. He's going to do like more corporate law, dealing with like copyright, trademarking and
Okay,
stuff.
gotcha.
And then my niece, she might do criminal law, but I think more so dealing with family and stuff. She just graduated USC law, so
No.
yeah,
Well,
they're studying right now
congratulations to
for
both of them.
they're studying right now for the bars. I don't know, man.
I remember
I
the
might
days.
go. You know what I'm saying? Y'all motivate me. Y'all, it might be my sign.
That's
You
right.
know, I just go. I'll be an ambulance chaser. Nah, I'm joking.
Don't do it.
I'm joking. Trey, you got anything before we wrap it up?
Yeah, when history looks back on your time as a federal prosecutor, a lot of things that we do it for like legacy and whatnot. What do you hope your legacy will be, not just legally but also like culturally and morally?
Well, first of all, is that the legacy that and how I try to carry myself every day is that when you look back on it, she treated everybody with respect, regardless whether they were victim or defendant. She treated everyone with respect. And even though we may not have liked the outcome, or we may not have liked the way it turned out, she was fair to us. She was respectful. She did her job and she did it well. And when she could help someone, she did. That's paramount to me, is to try to help is to help others. Like I said, even the defendants. If I can help you, if there's some way that I can help anybody, I try to do that. So I think if people were to look back on my legacy, that they would look back and say that, you know, she did her job and I may have been on the other side of it, but she was fair to me and she was a woman of her
Respect.
So any parting words, any words of advice, parting words before we get up out of here from you? The floor is yours.
Oh, well, you really put me on the spot right now. I just probably any parting words to anybody is that right now I guess I'm in a season of transition or pivoting. And so if there's anybody out there who finds themselves in the same situation that I am right now, like I said, it's just a period of transition, to remember that fear is a debilitator and that sometimes fear will keep you in situations where you think that you are comfortable, but you're really not comfortable. You just have gotten complacent. And so my parting words to everybody is to go out on a limb. That's where the fruit is.
Gotcha. Mine's is going to be like, call her. She's hot right now. She's a prosecutor. So if you got anything, if the price is right, she willing to come out of retirement.
I don't know about that. Retirement feels good right now.
Now, appreciate you for stopping by. Thank you for giving us your time,
No
and your
problem.
thoughts, your insight, and like every day, like, share, subscribe, Culture Uncut Podcast on every platform. You can play it in your car. You can watch it on YouTube, everything. Trey, you got anything for us to close it out?
Yeah, I think Jamila had hit the nail on the head. I think it is a season of like transition for a lot of people in life when it comes to these economics and hard times and whatnot. And in the words of Frederick Douglass, you know, there's no progress without struggle. So just keep that in mind, and you just keep at it. Will be my departing words.
And on that note, we are out. Boy.